Greetings all, it's Gerald Clark, November 14th, 2017. I wanted to do a bit of a follow-up to the threat briefing that I just posted recently, and I'm going to call this one a threat briefing analysis. And I'm going to take several documents to put this together, and I'll try to keep it short. And I'm not going to go into full depth on each of the documents, but I will give you links to each one of them. So there's some really important stuff that's going to come out today about further correlation between the various races that were identified in the threat briefing document. And I want to start with Thoth's Emerald Tablets from my 7th Planet Mercury Rising, page 241, Tablet 8, The Key of Mysteries. And I want to start by reading a couple of things to you here so you get an idea of the battle that was taking place all the way back to Atlantis. So Thoth informs us that he takes on different bodies during our incarnations with mankind. And we've seen that with Edgar Cayce's list of the incarnations of Jesus, as I've stated as well. We're told that man is in the process of changing to forms that are not of this world, approaching the formless or energetic spirit state to a place on the cycle above. A cycle above third, our dimension, is fourth. And we know that that's where the duad is that Thoth talks about that leads to the fourth and fifth dimensions. And this coincides with a threat briefing document saying we're moving to a higher dimension based on our position of our planet. We're told that we have to lose our bodies or become formless to merge with the light. And Thoth instructs us to speak without words, seeking light and wisdom. Thoughts are telepathic via the electromagnetic spectrum, and they're real things, directed toward those underground malevolent cycle masters dwelling in their blue light lit temple. These are the avatars that he said came with him, 32 of them, that are in the halls of Amente that also are here to assist mankind with their evolutionary process in conjunction with the cycle masters that he lists, 7 of them as well. A past retelling of the dark forces that mankind summoned from ancient Atlantis arrived in this cycle. Okay, I don't know if that means galactic cycle of the 25,920 years of a great year, or whether he's talking about the age. I think cycle truly means part of the great year. Formless and unable to be seen by Earthman. Well, isn't that something? Okay. They must reside outside of our meager 300 nanometer visible range where we can see from 400 to 700 nanometers. Our eyes can only see this in the simulator. And he also states they needed bodies, blood, to take on a physical form, and mankind's bodies to be exact. So now you know why blood sacrifices, and I put in parentheses, think of the Catholic Mass and the Bohemian Grove cremation of care ritual involving sacrifice. These bring in the dark forces as told herein. We were told they were serpent-headed when their glamour or their illusion was lifted, but otherwise appear as men among men. This is frightening. Thoth states that certain sounds made them visible using his magic. And the whole movie, They Live, used glasses to expose them. It was very, very analogous to what he's saying here. So what we want to get out of this is this serpent race that he calls them. Okay, so listen to this from page 242. High places of authority were sought out by the dark body snatchers to rule over mankind. Light forces smacked down the reptilian dark forces, so they went to war, but they returned at a later time to repeat the battle against the light. That's going on right now. That's what I believe is happening right now. Page 246. This is actually Thoth's words, okay? Far in the past, before Atlantis existed, men there were who delved into darkness, using dark magic, calling up beings from the great deep below us. Forth came they into this cycle. Formless were they of another vibration, existing unseen by the children of Earthmen. Only through blood could they have been formed beings. Only through man could they live in the world. Page 247. In ages past, they were conquered by masters, driven below to the place whence they came. But some there were who remained, hidden in spaces and planes unknown to man. Lived they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men. Aye, when the blood was offered, for they came to dwell among men. There you go. Very important point. In the form of man, they amongst us, but only to sight were they as our men. Serpent-headed when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men. Crept they into the councils, taking forms that were like unto men, slaying by their arts the chiefs of the kingdom. These are the presidents, the people of authority, okay? Taking their form and ruling over man. Only by magic could they be discovered. Only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and rule in his place. We've been invaded and we're being occupied by this very force, okay? But know ye, the masters were mighty in magic, able to lift the veil from the face of the serpent, able to send him back to his place. They talk about in the, here's the part where it talks about, on page 248. Came they to man and taught him the secret. He's talking about the masters. The word that only a man can pronounce. Does that mean the reptilians can't pronounce this word? Swift they lifted the veil from the serpent and cast him forth from the place among men. Now it's quite interesting. We're going to get to the Lacerta interview here in just a minute, and you're going to see. I'm going to talk about these serpent beings. Okay. Yet beware, the serpent still liveth in a place that is open at times to the world. So this is a galactic cycle thing, like some portal opening. Unseen they walk among thee in places where the rites have been said. What kind of rites? Masonic rites? Bohemian Grove rites in front of Moloch? Which ones? Probably all of them. Catholic rites? I say all of them. Again, as the time passes onward, shall they take the semblance of men. Called may they be by the master who knows the white or the black. I think he's talking about the white or black master. It's an interesting concept. But only the white master may control and bind them while in the flesh. So, the idea that we could possibly deal with these beings on our own, I don't think it's possible. I want to jump over to The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. In particular, there's a lot of symbology in there in the Divine Pymander, the vision of Hermes, where he first was out in the desert meditating, had a vision, and suddenly this celestial dragon whose wingspan was so huge it encompassed the entire sky, came forth to him and gave him a massive amount of information that's in this book. And for those that haven't read the book, Manly P. Hall, Secret Teachings of All Ages, this part in and of itself is worth the book, but the rest of the book's great too. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through this. The divine vision of Hermes discusses the celestial dragon encounter with the universal spirit of Poimander or Pymanders, they spell it different ways. After explaining the mysteries of the cosmos to Hermes, this dragon, Poimander mandates to Hermes to bring the mysteries of the galaxy to Earth and start mystery schools designed to elevate human consciousness. They weren't designed to enslave folks in a society lie to serve a false representative of humanity like Lucifer, Marduk, who's Amun-Ra in Egypt, okay? So that's what's going on now in the secret societies. And most of them have no idea what they've signed up for to go through this incremental process of going through ritual to get to truth. You've relegated your truth finding to an organization. That's a bad move, I'm telling you right now. Okay, with that said, the divine Pymander, or Poimander, of Hermes was thought to be the source of the winged dragon symbology. That was my hypothesis. As used by Thoth in Egypt and in Mesoamerica, the dreadful statue on display today in Peru of the plumed serpent god Morop, which is clearly a Draco reptilian or a wingless Lacerta, is just another label. We actually first called Amaru the plumed serpent. Here they're calling it Morop, so it's kind of in conflict with our Anunnaki series of what we had written. There were several of them in their pantheon of the Peruvian people in the Inca. So the Peruvian city of Chiclayo, also known as the capital of friendship, has a really weird monument dedicated to the ancient god Morop, this reptilian. And some artists put this thing together and put it up. And it seems pretty accurate. He must have taken it from the description, and I thought he did a good job. The Mochicas regarded this iguana man, or this reptile, as a powerful character who was crucial to their descent into the underworld, meaning into caves, probably under the ground. And we know they live underground. Acting as a mediator between the world of the living and the dead, Morop was equally feared and revered. So taking into consideration, let me see if I can scroll this a little smoother. It's jumping on me. No, it wants to go the whole page. Okay, let's go back. Taking into consideration everything you know about reptilians, doesn't it seem strange that the Mochicas chose to associate him with a subterranean, let's see, a subterranean, where to go? That's just scroll is terrible, sorry about that. Actions immediately taking okay, it seems strange that Mochicas chose to associate him with the subterranean realm of the dead. Was this association done by chance, or is it a subtle indicator of Morop's real nature? And South America is rife with legends and depictions of controversial characters that would neatly fit into modern theories about aliens, hybrids, and their dealings with the peoples of the earth. From Viracocha to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, this continent seems to have its fair share of age-old extraterrestrial interactions. And this is best reflected in the local attitudes toward aliens and UFOs. Here's a picture of El Amaru for you. Okay, it was supposed to be a double-headed dragon, so I don't know why this one's single. According to mythology of the Andean civilizations of South America, Amaru, Quechua or Qatari, Amara is a mythical serpent or dragon most associated with Tiwanaku and the Inca empires. Now, by the way, Tiwanaku is clearly affiliated with Enlil, so this is how Viracocha fits in very well, who is Iscaridad. In Inca mythology, the Amaru is a huge double-headed serpent that dwells underground. Illustrated with the heads of a bird and pumas, Amarus can be seen emerging from a central element in the center or step mountain or pyramid motif in the gateway of the sun at Tiwanaku, Bolivia. Okay, so that's enough on that. I wanted to say, though, in my studies, it led me to believe that the Peruvian image of the plumed serpent god Amaru, from which America's true name was derived, is not the same image used in Mesoamerica, where Quetzalcoatl Kukulkan was shown as a bearded, fair-skinned, Sumerian-looking figure. The only way that this figure could be the same as the Quetzalcoatl figure is if the winged serpent Amaru image was both Draco and Anunnaki and could shapeshift one to the other. And this gets really deep here. We're going to get into that in just a minute. So the idea that Anunnaki and Draco had mixed blood and they could go back and forth one to the other is what I'm suggesting this might be possible. From the threat briefing document, it was stated that the tall blondes from the Aldebaran system, as well as the Syrians, with similar features to us, both were considered part of a serpent race. Isn't that interesting? Because they shared the same logos on their patches that was described in the threat briefing document, along with the Draco, who used the same symbol of the winged serpent or dragon. This is where I got very concerned, especially since Thoth used this symbol. And Thoth clearly was here to help us, so I'm like, it brings up a lot of questions. Thus it appears that the tall whites or Nordics or blondes, whatever label you want to give them, could not only appear like us, but it could also use a reptilian form of a snake or a winged dragon. Maybe not all of them, maybe only some of them, but apparently they were able to do this. This reminds me of a Conan movie I'll talk about in a minute. This is probably due to the fact that the Nordic race that was conquered by the Anunnaki and then hybridized with their chimera-created humans, were then used, or were then infiltrated, okay? These ones were used as their hybrid kings in Sumer, Egypt, and elsewhere. Now the Illuminati bloodline that chooses presidents in the United States and elsewhere in England, they're doing the same thing. So they're looking for this bloodline of this mix between the hybrid Anunnaki, and they automatically got this reptilian mix in there because of the infiltration by the Draco into the Nordic line that was created. So this might explain some of the mixtures of the symbols that we see with the winged dragon or winged serpent or plumed serpent, whatever you want to call it, okay? The Draco were claimed to have interbred with the Nordic hybrids in order to infiltrate human governing structures as a form of invasion. Thus the mix would be Anunnaki with Neanderthal, with Nordic serpent blood, and Draco. This is a real crazy mix. The big question now to me is whether all the Anunnaki are in coalition with the Draco, who subsequently used the short grays for all the abductions and the stuff that we're seeing, okay? And this goes with Dr. David Jacobs' work and Derek Tyler's interviews and several others who are talking about this very thing. It appears from the Roswell alien interview with AIRL, this is the extraterrestrial biological entity mentioned in the threat briefing document, that the domain forces, okay, this is a very important point, aligned with Enki, Ahura Mazda, are battling the Dark Brotherhood, as they have since Thoth described coming to this planet and seeing that the Demiurgus slave system was in full swing. This goes back to way before the time of Atlantis, so we're talking 80,000 years ago or so. Okay, so this is how long this has been going on. All right, so it's funny, this reminds me of the Maserati Super Bowl commercial in which this young girl spoke about waiting until the slumbering giant was slow asleep, and then after doing all their due diligence and working hard and planning and plotting, the forces of light would step out of the shadows and strike. It was a great car commercial. It was a great war cry for all those ready to strike back too. The light forces will be most secretive and probably never expose themselves to the public. True discretion and anonymity is the best source of power. Thus, I believe the civilizations started by Thoth, like the Mayans, Peruvians, and Olmec, and probably the Inca, were ultimately overtaken by the Draco-infested south to all the way down to Lake Titicaca, Tiwanaku, upwards toward Peru, and north into the Yucatan, where the Mayan civilization was spawned by Thoth, Kukulkan. Thoth speaks of leaving the Yucatan due to war with Viracocha, which jives with me. So everywhere he set up a civilization, the Dark Brothers came along and tried to destroy it, introduced blood sacrifice with their war gods, and basically get them to serve the Draco overlords in conjunction with the high-level Anunnaki that were running it all. Okay, and not all the Anunnaki. In the Anunnaki series, we discussed the Aztec blood sacrifice rituals that came later. This was around 1468, which were introduced by their war god and ultimately served to feed the Draco reptilians, who must have had an Anunnaki Enlilite Alliance member who I identified as Viracocha Isker Adad. He was one of Enlil's sons that can be traced all the way back to the Hittites in Turkey, and also with Göbekli Tepe there as well. And he was a storm god, just like his father, Zeus Enlil. Okay. The Turkish-based Enlilite clan that was in the area post-Atrahasis flood, this is about 12,000 years ago, they were there to start rebuilding after this flood. And this is where the Fertile Crescent was located all the way over into Mesopotamia. And the ancient, let's see, seeds, I messed that up, seed crops. That we have domesticated, like wheat, were introduced in the Atrahasis as being supplied by Dumuzi when he returned with genetic source material from Nibiru to restart some life forms on Earth. Isn't that crazy? So that, if people who do genetic studies on early seed crops find that they do have a origin in the Fertile Crescent about 12,000 years ago, and this jives with the Anunnaki story. So it seems, just as Thoth warned us in the Emerald Tablets, that the Dark Brother Coalition with the Serpent Race, Dracos, and probably others, would overthrow the Poimander-mandated mystery schools, first established in Egypt by Thoth, and then he moved them around the world. Okay, you see, you saw the Masonic presence all over the world, and it still is today. The Marduk-sponsored Illuminati, in conjunction with the Papal Authority, infiltrated the Masons in Bavaria, Germany in 1776, and later in 1895, I wrote this in the Seventh Planet, Mercury Rising, the Christian God, Enlil, Yahweh, Jehovah, this was in England, overtook the Masonic York Rite order, replacing Thoth, the founder and grand architect of the Great Giza Pyramids and the Sphinx, as the God that we're supposed to trust in on the US dollar bill. Okay, so that's what happened. The symbols affiliated with Thoth were then subverted and reused by the current Masons, who have no idea who Lucifer really is, would be my guess, especially at the lower levels of the organization. And I'm going to tell you right now, for all of you Masons that are listening, it's Marduk, Enki's son, the rotten fruit of his seed. Get out. Correlation with negative polarity. Okay, so in the document, the threat briefing, it was talking about positive and negative polarity at creation that led to these artificial replicating viral intelligence life forms that don't have a soul because they did not receive the energy template from the creator of all to evolve back through the cycles that have all been set up to go back and have a connection with the source. Okay, so there is a direct correlation with that, and the Dark Lord of Arulu that Thoth talks about in his Emerald Tablets, basically being, creation and destruction. And so I think Enki and his half-brother Enlil were playing these roles. Enlil played the Dark Lord, or the negative pole, in the creation process, and Enki played the positive role. And we saw that in the actual way it played out in the Sumer documents. Creation and destruction happen simultaneously. Hang on. The Dark Brothers are headed by now, that doesn't mean they were then, are headed now by the Lucifer Illuminati coalition. And I think that coalition is formed by, and this is not in any particular order, Marduk, Enlil, Nanar, their family members, and some of the Draco and Greys, and probably others, including all the humans that sold out their peers in the secret programs, the military-industrial complex that have contracts with these ones, which really represent these ones, which are controlled by these ones. So these ones are at the top of the pyramid. Then you have proxy races at lower dimensions. By the way, the Anunnaki lived in the 6th dimension, and it looks like these Dracos were described as coming from the lower 4th dimension in the threat briefing document. So a lower dimensional species gets enslaved by a higher dimensional species, and it keeps going down the chain. Looks like we're at the bottom, unfortunately. I want to move to the alien Roswell interview, and I'm going to focus primarily on issues relating to the Anunnaki. So some really interesting stuff came out of this relative to the Anunnaki that it took me several times reading it before it sunk in. So the story is, in 1947, there's a crash. An extraterrestrial biological entity is captured, taken to a military facility where it's going to be interviewed. In the alien Roswell interviews, they call it that being AIRL, A-I-R-L, but in the threat briefing document, they call it this extraterrestrial biological entity that lived through the crash, which according to that document was caused by military radars bringing it down. So there's some good correlation here. In that document, and I encourage everybody to just listen to it or read it. I gave you the link here, it's on YouTube. You can watch all the parts of it. And it's read to you with the text, so it's pretty good. Anyway, these bodies that this alien Gray was using, these were like the 3.5 to 4 feet tall. She called them doll bodies. And this is Errol describing to this 23-year-old Army nurse how they're constructed. They're not biological bodies. They don't eat. They don't breathe air. They're basically bodies that can operate in hostile environments like space and then be discarded as necessary by beings that are able to occupy them, put their energy into them and use them as avatars. And this particular one was interesting because I have always thought of the Greys as being, I don't know, kind of like drones, not really, no independence. They're just kind of, they're like, I don't know, the Borg army, like that. So, but it's interesting in this account that the domain forces, and I see these as a coalition of light forces, by the way, now, and others, and there were 22 varieties of these Greys, which I don't want to take the time to go through every one, and for Rex, maybe one of them has a soul, I don't know, okay, but we're going to define a soul, I actually was going to do it now, but I think I'm going to wait till the end of the document and spend a little time on this. It's a good way to close the document. So we'll talk about that, and soul and energy, and where Gerald Clark fits in on this topic. And I've written quite a bit about this. Even wrote an energy equation for a human in both my books about this. So it's not new to me. As an electrical engineer, the idea of where energy meets matter is kind of an area I've always been about. So it's pretty intuitive to me. Anyway, let's go on. These Greys do not eat or drink, but do rub a human blood mixture on their skin. So they're not just abductors, they're end users of us as well. This came from Derek Tyler's interview with Connie Willis on Blue Talk Radio that I just listened to a couple of days ago. It wasn't from the Roswell alien interview, but it was a point I wanted to bring up. So Errol, this gray alien that had a domain flight commander who was a female from the domain forces occupying it, left her doll body lifeless in this laboratory environment where she was being scrutinized and interviewed by the nurse, to return to the domain which the military industrial complex interviewers could not stop. Then Errol revisits the Earth, later filling in some missing information, which was a must read. Thus, even the good coalition domain forces, okay, if you want to call them good, and I'll explain why I see them as good, can use alien gray bodies to do their missions in environments that require a non-biological being that can handle space travel. Okay, so just think of the alien gray bottle as a body that can be animated. We don't know if it's animated by a good being or a bad being, and this may have been part of the way the Anunnaki or the domain forces used to infiltrate the other side. We have no idea. So this domain mission in the coalition is why they were here on Earth. It's very interesting. Errol, I think it was on about page 100 of that document, starts describing who Ahura Mazda was, and that was Enki. We know that for a fact in Persia. Is part of the domain coalition to rescue those that were enslaved by finding that they have their Ba energy active with his flower of life detector. So all of you that have seen this image of Enki in Sumer holding a pine cone and holding a bag done in two different hands, she says this is the first place I've ever seen this described, that this is I'm getting ahead of myself, flower of life detector. Before I get to that, for those who don't know anything about the Flower of Life, Drunvalo Melchizedek's book series, Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, volumes 1 and 2, are probably for more of you esoterics out there that like all the symbology and the stuff, but there's a lot of good text in it that also describes things like how the flower of life, the tree of life, and the seed of life work, and also some history of that symbol as it was used in Egypt and found all over the world. And the fact that Enki was affiliated with it, and that Thoth describes the flower of life resonator or crystal in the halls of Amenti. So there's something about this flower of life, this geometry that they use, it's pretty spectacular. So, and it's also affiliated with the Merkaba meditation that was taught by Drunvalo as well. This Merkaba has to do with your two energy fields. And so I asked the question, is the mission to rescue the enslaved with the Flower of Life Merkaba going on today? So if Enki was here before with the domain forces, way back in the time of Persia, and looking for those who had been enslaved by the Demiurgus. So the Demiurgus, according to Manly P. Hall, is Yahweh Enlil. Okay, that's his half-brother. That's Enki's half-brother, Enlil. He's the slave commander on this planet. He's the lord of the command, okay? So their system, in conjunction with the Draco, and then in combination with the Greys they've set up, basically they were able to take an advanced spiritual being that was here visiting and trap them in a body, okay? And create a skewed perception prison for them that was so significant, they forgot their way back to how to get out. Okay, if it could happen to them, think about how susceptible we simple humans are. Okay, so this is what Enki was doing here way back in the time of Persia. And this flower of life detector and power supply has solely been explained thus far by Errol in the Roswell alien interviews. I have never seen it published anywhere else. That to me was amazing. And you tell me a 23-year-old nurse in a very, very tense laboratory setting where this extraterrestrial biological entity is being interviewed could make this stuff up. She probably never even knew who Ahura Mazda was. Probably never even heard of it. And the fact that it came up in the interview was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So let's move on to the Lacerta Files. And I hadn't heard of this until the past couple of years when a musician buddy of mine named Romaldo Ortiz pointed it out to me. Romaldo's a good guy, and I'm giving him a shout out right now because I haven't been in touch with him in a while. But anyway, I read through this interview, and the thing that jumped out at me the most was the discussions about their relationship to the Anunnaki. So let me read this to you, then I'll give you a summary. And here's a link to the YouTube video if you want to go see it. Just look up Lacerta on YouTube and you'll find it. This Lacerta reptilian claims to have evolved for millions of years on Earth, and based on what I see now from the Emerald Tablets of Thoth and the threat briefing document, this is a lie. They may have evolved here for some time, and then gone on to another dimension. But they were brought here by the people in Atlantis that called them forth during the blood and the rites, okay? They're the Draco, and they were called in at the time of Atlantis, just as Thoth states. And they even have the same winged serpent logo, okay? Well, in the Lacerta Files, it's a very long interview. This alien reptilian being meets individually with a person in a remote cabin, and basically it looks like they're running up a story, up a flagpole to see how society's going to respond to it. So they very much seem to be monitoring communications, the information flow, and determining how to change the perception. This Lacerta admitted that they eat humans, and this correlates with what the Draco were saying, and they also live in underground facilities on the Earth. So this is quite an interesting head spinner. From the one standpoint, it sounds like they're trying to convince humans that they have every right to be on the planet because they evolved here, and that they had 7 other empires in the galaxy. So they're highly advanced. They're not just lizards living under the ground. Well, one of the things that was described in this interview is that they had the ability, the mental ability, to project something into a human mind so that when you looked at them, you saw a human. You didn't see their true countenance, okay? Well, this is exactly what Thoth says he was able to unmask using a word or whatever. So there's a lot of correlation between these Lacertas and the Draco who were here to dominate us. And I think this was one of the wingless ones. Not all of them had wings or appurtenances on their ribs. And so you read it if you want, but I personally, after reading it now and thinking a lot about it, there's too many other correlations with the Draco, and I think this is a lie. Okay, but what they did say that was truth, they always mix truth with a lie, is they said they were here when the Anunnaki came and abducted early hominids and hybridized them into chimeras, slave workers to work the mines. And that also agrees with the threat species document. So. And the Lacerta, from that standpoint, said, you know, first of all, if they were truly here and evolved, where was their relationship with the early humans and what were they doing? Eating them? They didn't say. Why didn't they intervene if they truly were, you know, benevolent to mankind? But they didn't. But ultimately, these serpent beings and the Anunnaki went to war, and Thoth says they chased them out of this dimension, and some of them landed underground. So this kind of jives with what was going on. Maybe these Draco were eating the early humans as a food source, and the Anunnaki interrupted it and decided to evolve them so that they'd know what was going on. I don't know the truth about the matter, but it's very interesting. The next bullet point I want to go off to, or topic, is several years ago from Truth Frequency Radio, I was turned on to an anonymous message by Enki that really resonated with me. I listened to it many times. It kept coming up in my consciousness. I'd correlate this, correlate that. And I really didn't find anywhere in there that I could find a lie. So after a while, I pretty much adopted it as true, and I've shared it on a YouTube video. But in that message, Enki introduces himself. He talks about the sins that he's committed against mankind, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes on to say that Marduk, his son, the rotten fruit of his seed, plans to be the Lord of the earth after the surface is destroyed due to Nibiru's passage. So this New World Order coalition hopes to rule the planet at that time, and Enki says, no way, and no secret space refugees will be permitted to go to the moon or Mars. And those that sell out their fellow humans and go underground, aligned to the New World Order Dark Brotherhood, you will be enslaved until the next great year. That's 25,920 years from now. How many times do you think you can incarnate as a slave in that time? And I'm telling you what, I'd rather die right here, right now on the surface. I will not do this. And he warns all of you that are aligned with the Dark Brotherhood, that's what's going to happen to you. So I'm saying no thanks. And he states he's attempting to mitigate Nibiru's passage effects. Could this be why CERN is generating such a large magnetic field that, when it directed it the right way, could counteract the Earth's tilt due to an incoming planet? Possibly, I don't know for sure. And the plate tectonic reinforcements were described by, in another document, with boring around the ring of fire and offsetting the planetary tilt due to gravitational influences from the planets or Nibiru's close perihelion passage. So this is kind of like a long shot. in my mind. If Enki, and listen, Nibiru's passed many times before and hasn't completely destroyed everything. It really just depends on where the Earth is and where their planet is at the crossing. So if there's anything that he can do that's going to mitigate that, I imagine how much of a wrench that would throw in Marduk's plans to become the New World Order leader if this surface description doesn't happen. Well, he has plans upon A, B, C. He has every contingency plan according to Enki, and so they'll probably trigger off a nuclear war to cause the same conditions. So watch for that. So now I'm going to do kind of a summary analysis for you. In the last threat briefing document, I presented the contract terms between the Greys with the U.S. government, and you can clearly see the impact that's had on the NSA, the CIA, and the secrecy in hiding the UFO phenomenon from the public. I mean, imagine the situation. They've agreed to allow their citizens to be abducted, and ultimately they find out that more of them are being abducted than what they told them, and the fact that all of a sudden you realize they're not just here, you know, wanting to study us and then go away. They're here to dominate this planet and eat your children. So how in the world could anybody in the government ever disclose that without causing, you know, a major breakdown in society? So I think that's part of the other reason. And because of that, I agree with Derek Tyler and with Dr. Jacobs, there will not be a disclosure. And anybody that thinks there will be, they're wasting your time. I believe that also based on these contracts, that it's pretty clear that population control goals were sourced from these alien occupiers. So they only need so many of us to sustain their DNA and to do their dirty work, you know, mine their gold, get their resources. And I think that has a lot to do with the number of 500 million total humans that they're going to allow on Georgia Guidestones. So that's a pretty significant reduction from 7.5 billion or where we're at right now. Let's talk a little bit about the players and these alliances. So summarizing, we've got the Anunnaki, we've got the Draco, the Greys, and according to the threat briefing document, there's 9 other species he details and 70 others that he doesn't. Okay, so he just pointed out the 9 most active ones. Well, the 3 at the top to me were the Anunnaki, the Dracos / Nordics, and the Greys that really to me are just they're just the soldiers that follow orders, okay, and do whatever they're told. So according to Enki's anonymous briefing and my watching for symbols around the world and such, let's kind of play a little hypothetical chess game and put the players where they're at and what their agendas are and see how it rolls out. So we've been told that the EU and the Vatican are clearly occupied by Marduk Lucifer, so with his religious control over the world, and the economics, okay? There's a lot of influence from the economics in the EU and London, and now it looks like there's some shift to go to the EU. Well, you think Marduk didn't have something to do with that? So he also, because of his dad's domain was Africa, it looks like him arriving there and being reported in a Veterans Today article twice around the Nelson Mandela funerals being in Africa. I think he's probably down there to shore up the gold, because gold and the economic system drive the slave system. Okay, if we weren't all slaving to get money to buy food, this wouldn't be most of what people end up doing to get that money wouldn't be possible. You wouldn't be able to hire somebody to, you know, go in and commit a murder or all these kind of awful things and if they weren't being paid. Okay, they don't do this for nothing. Okay, now in the USA and Israel, I think this ought to be pretty obvious. Jehovah Yahweh is the God of Israel. He's the God of wrath and vengeance of the Old Testament, and he clearly has been using the United States as their proxy military with all the machinations going on, everything from the Federal Reserve that's controlled by Jewish people, all the way down to AIPAC and many other control functions. Okay, I misspelled control. And there's a guy named Brother Nathaniel on YouTube who does videos. I guess he's kind of an Orthodox Christian now, but he was Jewish by heritage. And he comes out and makes some of the most outlandish videos tying together everything that the Jewish control structure has done to America to destroy it. So anyway, if I actually would have had a lot more confidence in Trump's ability to do anything as a president had the first thing he'd been done was to throw out the Federal Reserve that was a debt slave vehicle imposed on America from the outside. In the Middle East, oh, by the way, so Enlil's got control of the U.S. war machine and the banking structure. Okay, so now you can see Marduk's got some of that over in Europe, and he's very much controlling the Catholic religion through the Vatican, whereas Enlil, he's the god of the three major religions: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Okay, so the Abrahamic religions were spawned by Enlil. Okay, the Middle East. This is quite interesting. Speaking of Enlil, his son Nanar is Allah, the god of Islam, and you can see what he did to his own boy at the city of Ur during the Second Dynasty when he blew the place up in conjunction with Anu's permission. Okay, so father and son, they don't get along. Okay, so Nanar looks to be being used by Enlil, if I had to guess, to take his army of Islam and infiltrate the EU, because Enlil and Marduk are in coalition, but they never got along. As a matter of fact, Marduk overthrew Enlil in 2000 BC in massive wars and took over the Lord of the Earth command. Well, now Enlil's got it back. So you think these two are going to get along and go along? Well, I don't see it. So I think their coalition could be fractionalized. And it looks like Enlil is using Nanar to do that to Marduk. So it gets messy. Okay. So it's funny. Also, the power of the flesh is as discussed in Conan. This was interesting, where the power of the flesh at Thal-Sadum, where the serpent temple was, he was saying this was more powerful than the riddle of steel. Well, if you can get a suicide bomber to use their body as a bomb, I think he's probably right. So I thought that was an interesting correlation. Russia. This to me looks like and this is kind of a head spinner, because when I was in the military, I was spun up to kill a commie for mommy. Okay, we were all about training against Russia and all their Russian equipment. We learned it all, and now I come to find out, after looking deeply into this, that at some point in time, and I don't know the true extent of, maybe it's a contractual relationship, Russia's got high technology. As a matter of fact, they have higher technology than much of the world, if not all of it. Well, Enki was the premier scientist of the Anunnaki, and if he decided he was going to empower one civilization to thwart another one, a light versus dark kind of situation, that's what I'd expect to see, and that's what we're seeing in Russia. And actually, all the things that Putin is being animated to do are the signs of a true leader, which is really crazy for me to be saying that right now, but that's what I see. So I think the creator of man, his half-sister who carried the baby, and his son who is the guardian of the tree of the knowledge and the initiator into the mysteries, are all three aligned with Russia, or those that are opposing the New World Order forces being headed up by Marduk and Enlil and his family. And this is a likely coalition with the domain forces too, because you saw that Enki was aligned with Errol from the domain forces, and they're aligned with the cycle masters, the 7 cycle masters in the Emerald Tablets. Okay, they control what consciousness is allowed in this cycle. Okay, and Thoth is a part of that in being a teacher to allow that. And don't forget the 32 avatars that never took on a body. These are light body beings that came with Thoth to the halls of Amenti, as he describes. Okay, and they supposedly were here to help mankind in this battle as well. So now, all of a sudden, they're in full confrontation with Enlil and Marduk over this New World Order prison planet. As we see in the news and the headlines, these white hats are taking down the control constructs piece by piece. And they're not doing it all at once. It almost seems like they're doing everything they can to avoid it breaking out into full-out war. So there's this hidden tit-for-tat back and forth going on between multi-allied governments with aliens trying to gain control over dominion of the earth. So I expect the proxy wars to break out in full view shortly. And I mean proxies like Syria, what happened in Ukraine, what's happening in Yemen, what's all of a sudden looks like going on between Saudi Arabia and Lebanon. These are proxy wars between the entities, the ancient aliens that are animating the United States and Russia primarily. That's how I see it. And I think they're now in full confrontation, and I think they're about to break out into full view. Okay, so I guess you would call this the big show, and this is discussed. This light versus dark battle is discussed happening by Thoth in Emerald Tablet 12, and he basically indicates that it's going to go to nuclear war, and at that point, about partway through it, he says that's when the sons of the morning are going to step in and stop it. So we'll see, but that's not a good thing, knowing that it's probably going to go to nuclear war if Nibiru doesn't do anything or Enki doesn't have any luck with it. So these occupying forces in the Demiurgus coalition, this is the prison planet, they need human DNA and parts to continue being in this dimension. These are the Draco. They're in disguise, walking among us. So the movie They Live, if you haven't seen it, please do, is a documentary, and it was intended to be such by the producer. Watch it again. So we need that word that unmasks their countenance, these Dracos that are occupying bodies and basically leading our world into complete disharmony. But better still, I mean, you don't want to say a word and somebody hear you say the word and then all of a sudden their mask comes off and they go, oh, I'm going to eat you, okay? It's better to have a pair of glasses where they don't know that you know, okay? So that you can see them, identify them, and then maybe at a later time sort them out at the right time, okay? And by the way, we're all out of bubble gum for you all out there that have seen the movie. Okay, I'm going to go to the current state of the standoff. We're just about done here. What I see, okay? I see Russia enveloped by NATO as the dark forces are trying to take out any country that's sovereign that won't be submissive to the New World Order. So anybody that's like that, they're surrounding them, trying to take them out. Russia has been surrounded, so is China and many others. Okay, but because of the advanced energy weapons that Russia has and their ability to disable aircraft, vehicles, ships, they were able to defuse a lot of that. And so, but I still think there are several triggers that could lead to all-out war, going from a proxy war where yes, the humans are involved, but you don't see the alien weapons coming out yet, or maybe you do. China was also surrounded, and Japan is being used as a new proxy weapon against China, and probably North Korea as well. And by the way, I spent time in South Korea, almost on the demilitarized zone in 1983-84. So I had first-hand experience of this conflict. And North Korea is kind of a buffer for China, but also for Russia, and is a pawn and a catalyst for World War III. So if this buffer goes down, then both China and Russia will be drawn in, and the United States knows that. And I think it's very possible that North Korea will be invaded on Trump's orders now that it's been approved in Congress for a ground war. This is serious. This is really serious. If this happens, this will start World War III. And they're looking for any way to start it in accordance with Albert Pike's predictions, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Enki's trident symbol is on the front of the Maserati, and it was on the Ukrainian flag until the New World Order Nazi forces overthrew the government. Okay, if you don't know that that's what happened, and it's disgusting. By the way, Ukraine is a spot where we see how good of a chess player Enki really is. He was able to manage that and diffuse that without it breaking out fully, even though NATO was trying to further encroach on his borders. And they did the same thing in Syria, invading Syria with foreign proxy armies, trying to get control of the country just so they could have their stupid pipeline and feed Europe and get the money versus having Russia do it. Well, Putin thwarted all-out war and is still managing to defeat the Dark Brother forces that invaded for a pipeline. And I say this is irrational greed on steroids, and that truly is, but I think it has something to do with a resource grab before the surface could possibly become uninhabitable for a while, so they're trying to get everything that they need now, and it's done so openly now. It's obvious they're kind of in a state of desperation. Well, I expect to see this resource grab on the surface before Nibiru causes some terrible effects to continue. And we see this with the underground supplying of food trucks going to underground bases in the United States, filling them full of food, all the guns and ammo that they've been buying. Gold and oil are also resources, and among other raw materials and precious metals that will be needed to control the populace. The ones that are chosen to survive a catastrophic Nibiru passage or nuclear war, or whatever trigger Marduk and his New World Order forces decide to use to create chaos before order, okay? Order out of chaos, right? His order. And this is not me saying, this is what Enki said. He said Marduk plans to emerge as the New World Order leader. That is Lucifer, okay? But Enki says, no, that's not gonna happen. So that's quite interesting to know that. Okay, some interesting other things out of the news, just real quick, about the idea of creation instruction, positive, negative polarity. It started making me think about, well, what's going on at the North and South poles? There's all this news. Well, the South Pole is our negative pole, and our North Pole is considered our positive one. Well, that's just because how the electrons flow that cross the electromagnetic field, okay? So if the poles switch, then it would go the other way. Anyway, but we see that happen with some planets. You know, they do switch poles, and you get different effects at the poles. Well, is it possible, I'm just hypothesizing right now, that the poles are the place where you have a split in the, I guess you would call the envelopment of the Earth, which is 3 tiers that keep this a prison planet. And I believe those are represented by the Van Allen belt. So if we were to look at the poles, it looks like this could be a place where ancient astronauts and other visitors could be coming and going because of some special feature, wormhole, a black hole that allows them to create some sort of portal construct. I don't really know. But it's interesting that they've chosen the poles. Let's look at this real quick. So at the South Pole, let's assume this is the negative polarity pole, okay? Well, we see the New World Order puppets all over down at the South Pole with their South Pole telescope and bases, as witnessed recently. So that's kind of interesting. And by the way, this is where the Germans went into the South Pole at the close of World War II to try to create a sub-base underground where they were having an interaction with some extraterrestrial beings. It looks like now it was probably the Greys and the Draco, and probably high-level Anunnaki, the one at the top, who was Marduk. That's what my guess was. So I think it was both. So these dark forces, these ancient astronauts that visited the South Pole facilities. No. So I'm positing that there were dark forces there. Let's assume this negative polarity. Well, recently, I think it was Buzz Aldrin, I can't remember which astronaut, went to the South Pole right about the time John Kerry went there and was mortified and ended up hospitalized as a result of his encounter. I thought that was really bizarre. I think he said something to the effect it was pure evil. And, you know, the day of the election between Obama running off against Trump, John Kerry goes down to that location in Antarctica and then ends his tour to Climate Summit. So this is where our South Pole telescope is. He was probably down there to get an update on what the New World Order forces are doing relative to the timing of this event, because that event is very important to their timing. This South Pole telescope has an incoming view of Nibiru from the southern hemisphere, just as Dr. Harrington told us it did. And I believe these New World Order forces have this event as a trigger in their plans. The idea of chaos being caused not by them, but that they can then take advantage of it and implement their final clampdown to establish a one world order. They're having a lot of trouble. They've not been able to do it so far, but that's why they call it the progressive movement. Let's look at the North Pole real quick. This is the positive polarity. In Admiral Byrd's diary, when he meets the master, when his aircraft was brought down and he goes underground, he meets Thoth there, and when Thoth warns him about the military-industrial complex and the consequences if mankind doesn't stop what they're doing. So that was at the North Pole. So here the threat briefing document says that the tall whites, or the Nordics, are at the North Pole. Okay, and by the way, Russia seems to be really focused on the North Pole. They're staking out claims up in that area, putting all their icebreaker. They got way more icebreakers than anybody else in the world. They're using over there. So what do they know? Is the pole going to shift? Is the North Pole then going to become the habitable place? And I don't know what's going on here, but it seems to have something to do with the alliance with the forces that are there. And once again, we see that Thoth was there and Russia's there. So there's your tie back again to Thoth, Enki, and probably Ninmah Isis with these forces. And those three were responsible for humanity, and they probably feel more mortified by what's happening to us. In the Emerald Tablet 12 prophecy, I mentioned that. Thoth says that there will be a world war, and that's when the sons of the morning will step in. Well, I think we're real close to that, if I had to guess. As a matter of fact, the last week I felt like any slight breeze could cause the dominoes to fall, and then it's going to be unstoppable. And also, as of 1871, Lucifer's boy, Albert Pike, in the Masons, or the Illuminati. He was in the Masons at this time, but that's because the Illuminati overtook the Masons. Okay, they have plans for a new world order, and if you look at the chess pieces on the board, they're aligned exactly to do what Pike predicted way back in 1871. And it could happen any day. There does seem to be actions to stop the New World Order. If you look at Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, they formed a coalition, economic one, to get out from underneath the false petrodollar that's been the biggest Ponzi scheme since we did that to protect Saudi Arabia way back when. Okay. The Syria intervention by Russia, that was serious. They put boots on the ground. They truly stopped what the New World Order was doing to establish a pipeline, take the Arab oil and have it cheap sold to Europe. Okay, that was probably spawned by Marduk, now that you know it was intended to serve Europe. And all these actions appear spawned, they have Enki's signature written all over them, including what's happening in the country of Russia itself in terms of freedoms, freedom to carry, rights, sovereignty, all the things that are happening. It's just the opposite, like I wrote in my book, The Seventh Planet, of what's happening in America. So it's like they switched roles. It's interesting to me that the internet and the information war is still going on right now. I would have imagined that the New World Order, if they could have, they would have, through their domain name service, immediately shut off anybody who was considered an enemy. But they haven't been able to do that. And I think that's because of Enki, if I had to guess. So I asked the question, is free speech a galactic right that's now being, yes, editorially stamped all over by those that are trying to, but they haven't been able to stop us completely. It's very interesting. So there's some hope there that could wake up enough people to stop this, especially the order followers that are serving up their children to the alien grays through orphanages, through abductions in parks, and all the other things that are going on, okay? As we approach the galactic center, the energy change is inevitable unless they can put some sort of shield around the whole Earth and stop the Schumann resonance from doing what it does. Inevitably, all us slaves are going to wake up in our conscious body to the highest state of awareness called universal consciousness. And that has to be timed by the New World Order to clamp down before that happens. So you can see the ascension and the clamp down are kind of happening in coincidence with each other, and that's not a coincidence, okay? And I've predicted that World War III would happen as soon as Nibiru showed up, if it did anyway, because they need that in order to do the order out of chaos. And it's better if they don't start a war, because then they get galactically blamed for it. But if a natural event does it, they can just kind of piggyback on that. Recently, under Trump's presidency, a large bomb, they call it a Moab, was dropped on a bunker somewhere between Afghanistan or Pakistan, okay? Well, there are suggestions that there are stasis beings from various civilizations that are here to arise whenever this happens, when this light-dark war happens, so that the big players can play. So I don't know which ones they're targeting. I sure hope it's not the Enkyites that are here to help, okay? But I don't really know. And it's interesting that Russia went to Iran when that stasis body was found that was underneath I don't know, one of their cities, and it turned out to have the symbols of a Hura Mazda on it. I was kind of freaked out by that. Well, this was Enki. And the fact that Russia absconded with this body and took it away so the New World Order forces couldn't destroy it, I find that very interesting. Very interesting. There's a blog on my website about that under GeraldClark77.com. I think once the New World Order forces, if they do start losing, I'm very concerned they will use a thrash and burn policy to destroy that which they cannot control. I don't want to let my imagination go wild there, but the fact that they've got so many possible ways to do it is a little frightening. And the good news is in this alliance is it does appear that, as Thoth told us in Emerald Tablet 6, by the way, if you haven't read that whole one or listened to it, I encourage you to do it. He talks to you about how to deal with these dark entities and how to banish them from your ability to affect your soul, your energy body. These light forces also walk among us and are going to intervene, according to Thoth, at just the right time. That doesn't mean we're supposed to sit here and go, well, you know, we don't have to worry about it because the aliens are fighting among each other. Well, they're using you as fodder, so you have to decide what you're going to do as well. Okay? So this last part, I decided to ask the question, what will it take to be free? And before I end, I am going to talk a little bit about the soul. I'll end with that, okay? What will it take for humanity to be free from those that are occupying us? And now that you see from this threat briefing document, and so much time has passed since 2005, and so many events have taken place, that I think this information is actually valid, or I wouldn't be sharing it with you, okay? So I do think we're under occupation by alien forces, the Dark Brothers, just like Thoth said. And I think the only way for us to be free is, I think truly, ultimately, you're gonna have to see a consciousness shift spawned by an outside force before people get to the place where their skewed perception prison has been lifted enough where this can even happen. There's no way they're going to form a federation for human freedom across the planet, given the division that we have now. It's not even fathomable. I'd like to be more optimistic on this, but humanity speaking as one voice, don't see it. Not for a while, not without major change. I think if the government's going to get into contract with anyone, they ought to get in contract with the light forces to participate in the sun enslavement now that they've already signed a contract with the dark ones, and see how that can go. I think we need to identify and bring justice to all those that are aiding and abetting alien invasion, occupation, arm race, and trafficking. So if you're aiding and abetting the enemy, you're the enemy. That's what I'm saying. So get to the place where you know who you're serving ultimately. And if you're serving someone that shouldn't be on the list, then stop doing it. It's that easy. Don't worry about the consequences of what happened to you. Worry about your long-term karma of who you're being involved with, okay? All beings should be tested for their Ba energy as well, as was done by Enki with his Flower of Life detector. And all those that have been enslaved by the Demiurgus system need to be freed. Well, apparently they have the technology to do that. The Demiurgus money system and slave trade, it's got to be dismantled. And I think we could do this nicely, but it doesn't have to necessarily be nice. They've been eating our kids, for crying out loud. We need to uninvite all those hostile to humanity to leave this planet with whatever technology and capabilities we have. And if we don't have the technology to confront them directly, we know that guerrilla warfare, cutting off their systems, hit them when they least expect it. You do that over time long enough, they're going to get tired of it. And basically, we're going to encourage them to leave on their own. So there's a whole section of the threat briefing document that talks about responding to them. I don't know, I really got to think about a lot of that stuff to really see if humans could really do anything to throw them off other than stop serving their agenda. So I think we need to establish a civilization that's based on principles like those from Atlantis. And that means the principle of seeking that which is coincident with the sun soul spirit that was given to you, which means whatever is elevating your consciousness, taking you to a higher place. Okay, that's the long-term game. And those are character qualities, okay? As we all know. That's what takes you to the higher states of energy, is living a life of integrity and seeking the truth. And just for fun, right before I talk about some soul energy, I want to encourage you all to watch Cowboys and Aliens with a different set of eyes now, because it was fun having some alien that the Cowboys got to go after, but now you realize those Dracos, like in the movie The Gargoyles, are real. They're here, and they are dominating the human species and just tolerating us as long as they get what they need. I don't think they would have any problem wiping us out completely. So, with that said, I'm just over an hour. I want to talk about energy just real quick, and will ultimately lead up to what our concept of a soul is. First of all, I want to say that as a structural integrator, I've had a tremendous amount of experience with my hands on human bodies, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, dealing with human energy, so much so that I resorted to buying a resonant field imaging system that allowed me to see human energy in the frequency domain, and also, or measure it in the frequency domain, and then also to purchase a polychromatic interference photography key that allowed me to use high definition video to see the human energy body. Okay, so that doesn't mean that's all there is what you can see, okay, depending on what spectrum you're looking at. The human body is a very complex interaction between material and energy. It's where the finite meets the infinite, okay? And it does it with various energy forms. In my first book, I wrote an equation for the energy of a human. I call it equation 5A, which basically takes into account your chakra energy. And the reason I chose that one, your 7 chakras, to talk about that energy field is because those 7 spheres, or if you will, the chakras, are described by Poimander in Manly P. Hall's book, In the Divine Vision of Hermes, where he relates the chakras to one of 7 planets in our system, and each one having a different aspect when you die, whether you come back and get recycled or whether you go to a further ascension. If you go onto a further ascension, you give back all those aspects of the chakras to these 7 spheres. And he describes which planet they are, and it's actually a very fascinating read. So the idea that there's 7 cycle masters that control your 7 chakras, that have attributes from the various planets in this construct, this is quite amazing. Well, let's be general just for a second. There's energy and there's matter. And energy is neither created nor destroyed, it only changes state. That's true of the energy that animates you, okay? You can call it spirit, you can call it chi, you can call it whatever you want, but the life energy that animates you comes from the creator of all, okay? For those that are sun soul spirits, okay? This is the distinction. Those who don't have a sun soul spirit do not leave this dimension. They're trapped here, unless they're interdimensional beings and they're using human bodies to go back and forth. Okay, if you've got a sun soul spirit from the creator of all, your intention is to be evolving all the way back to the creator of all, so such that you become one with the source. And every creation that comes from the creator of all is designed that way. Okay, and that's mentioned in the threat briefing document as well, that when beings decide to create another being, that is a requirement of the universe that they do that they get the permission of the creator of all, and that the energy from the creator of all is part of that creation. Okay, if it's not, it's an artificial copy, and that's where the concept of artificial replicating viral intelligence came up inside the threat briefing document. Well, that's what we call the Luciferian consciousness, okay? A soulless consciousness that extorts, uses people like psychopaths, and doesn't seem to care about the consequences of it. Well, that's because they don't have any consequences. They're not going forward. So whatever they do, they don't care about the accountability because they're already damned. You see what I'm saying? Whereas us, we are eternal beings with a energy from the creator of all. Now, let's talk about that. Let's just talk a little bit about the soul and the soul path. According to Thoth's writings, he talks about the Emerald Tablets, the energy constructs of a human, and he gives you the constructs that were given to you by the creator of all as well, including the mind of the creator of all, to guide you into finding this pathway back to the light, okay? Well, from a scientific standpoint, energy is a template. It's a signature that interacts with the material form, in particular the DNA. And this is light, okay? This is the light energy, or photons that interact with the DNA, that somehow manifest from the unmanifested state of a photon into material form by stitching atoms, molecules, and things together to make a human. Well, this is how all matter is made. So in general, there's an energy template that describes something, and then there's the physical manifestation of the attributes to fill out that template. And humans are no different than a tree in that sense. Every living thing, even inanimate things, have an energy template for it to be created in matter. Okay, and Thoth talks in deep terms about that in the Emerald Tablets. Some of it is probably not even understandable to those who are not of a scientific mind. But what I see the soul energy is the infinite spark from the creator of all that animates all beings. And when he talks about in the Emerald Tablets the two responsibilities of the creator of all, he talks about the creation of time through a cymatic wave, and then he talks about the creation of matter. And this is where it gets really, really interesting in realizing that the creator of all creates what we would call a holographic simulation, where what we see is not really real, but it's a construct of energy. So the only real thing to me is energy, okay? And your soul energy is nothing but energy that has been defined by some, I guess, constructs from the creator of all, but that doesn't mean that once a life is created that it can't be genetically modified and tweaked with for good or evil. And so those that are doing cloning and all those kind of things, that's not done in accordance with how the creator of all creates. So anytime there's cloning, expect there's probably not a soul. Now here's the crazy part. According to Derek Tyler, and I believe this is true as a scientist, they can not only, if we can visualize your energy signature, that means we could record it and we could recreate it. So we can copy your energy signature. We could store it in a flash drive. So basically, when you have energy, it can be replicated. It can be tweaked. It can be sensed from anywhere in the galaxy. So the idea that our energy is attached to our meat and it never comes detached, that's not true. I think you have an out-of-body experience where your energy separates from your body every night during REM sleep. And this has been somewhat studied by the Monroe Institute and several others. But in Derek Tyler's discussion of the soul, he said these aliens have the technology, and that includes the Greys, the Anunnaki, and the Draco, to not only detect your energy body, sense it, change it, take it out of your body, put it into another body, store it into a container field, like something that could store energy. I don't, whether it's a capacitor or a Faraday cage, whatever, or battery, whatever. They can do this. So when you go back to the Atrahasis and see Enki killing one being of the Ajiji and then taking his energy and putting it into the Adapa, that was frightening to me that they had this ability. Well, they're saying in this document they do have that ability. So all of a sudden, the idea that your soul is something that you could protect, this is where it gets crazy. And this is why I tell people to go read Emerald Tablet 6. Thoth tells you the only way for you to protect yourself is to enroll the powers of the cycle masters. Okay, these are the 7 ones that are in the halls of Amente that control your 7 chakras. He asks you to, if you can't shake off the frequency of the Dark Brothers yourself, he tells you to use them to do it, and he gives you the words to do that. And I've posted videos on it. I have the Emerald Tablets recorded from my audiobook and all that kind of stuff. But I'm here to tell you, as a participant in this simulator that's had lots of interactions with both good and bad, that Thoth is believable and his words are true through the ages. And I'm not interested in religion, and I don't know if you folks are either, but I am interested in the truth. And when something is true through the ages, and you try it and you find out it's true, and it completes the entire story, including his 9 dimensions of the holographic simulator that he described in the Emerald Tablets, I actually have a lot of trust and thought to be telling us the truth. There's some things I need to figure out about his symbology and his relationships to the Draco, but he was the one that pointed out the serpent species that was here dominating us and gave us the keys to getting ourselves free. So to me, that's somebody that's benevolent toward mankind. There's probably lots of other races like the Pleiadians and the Procinians and several others that are standing by, not interfering and watching us. But Thoth stuck his neck out and decided to not only write it, but to set up mystery schools to teach us how to get out of this enslavement. So I really appreciate that. I'm not going to do much more tonight. I could talk for a very long time about energy in the human body and the soul path, but I think that's enough for today. And I probably will be doing more of these. I oftentimes have difficulties with my internet connection, so if I'm on Zoom, for instance, with more than one person, my system will often go in and out. And so recording on my own and then uploading and having good audio quality, that's one of the things that I have done in the past, and I'll probably do more of that going forward. Okay, this has been Gerald Clark. This is the threat briefing analysis according to me, and we out.